Welcome back to Consider This. Melisa and Sharaad here with you. Now, joining us in the studio is our colleague Hafiz Marzukhi to bring us updates on the Tanjung Piai by-election campaign. Hafiz, thanks for joining us. Now, let's do a little bit of a recap how each candidate is doing. Let's start with Karmaini Sardini, the Pakatan Harapan candidate. Let's take a look at his profile.
Okay, Hafiz, so that's the first candidate. Of course, Pakatan Harapan holding that seat rather marginally after the last general election. Now, what we understand from our reporter on the ground and what you've gathered, what's happening with his run?
So you see, it's a very interesting thing, Sharaad, with Karmaini, because I would say he started off brightly because he's the government candidate. But unfortunately, it seems that he seems to be carrying the weight of the world behind his shoulders. You know, it seems that the whole of Pakatan Harapan is banking on him and the spotlight is on him. And it somehow affected his, I wouldn't say his performance, but his progress throughout the campaign. Because he seems to start well, but I mean, he's kind of dropped the ball with the comment on the Kelapa Sawit, the issue of, there are several issues that he seems to drop the ball.
Right. So the Kelapa Sawit one, if I can remind everybody, was when he said that that people, you know, in the palm oil industry should be happy with what they're getting. And of course, it's often said that politicians should be telling people that they should be happy. They should be dealing with why they're unhappy.
Dealing the issues, yeah, yes. and providing solutions. And this is the thing about Karmaini. He contested in Pontian and lost to Ahmad Maslan. And you see, he seems to be like, he needs to rediscover his vigor to ensure that he can sustain throughout the campaign, which is like, we only have tomorrow.
So, you know, you said that, look, it feels like Karmaini is carrying the weight of the Pakatan Harapan hopes on his shoulders. Yes. I also read a lot about analysts' assessment of the current situation, saying that actually, it's Dr. Mahathir's, I guess, star power that's kind of bankrolling the Pakatan Harapan campaign in Tanjung Piai. What do you think about that?
I would say that is the case for every Bersatu candidate, or most of Bersatu candidate. It seems to run on the Dr. M factor. You know, everything.
His star power.
Yeah, it's about you vote me and you get Tun Mahathir as a leader. But sometimes it just doesn't work that way, especially in a by-election. And I followed your conversation with Bridget Wells, and this is a bellwether election for Pakatan. So I'm sure the Tanjung Piai constituents are looking at Karmaini not just as Karmaini, a local leader, well-liked and everything. They see him as a symbol of Pakatan Harapan. And that seems, based on my conversation with Firdaus, he seems to think that he is the punching bag to all the frustrations.
Right, and Firdaus being, of course, our colleague on the ground there in Johor. But let's turn our attention to Wijek Singh, who's the Barisan Nasional candidate. Now, this is a seat that has been held by Barisan Nasional for many electoral cycles. Wijek Singh himself was MP for 2 terms. If you look at the win last year for Pakatan Harapan, the combined votes of PAS and Barisan Nasional actually was more than what Pakatan Harapan got, right? So this is a deeply marginal seat. I mean, it would be not surprising if it lands back in Barisan Nasional. And what's the state? If Karmaini was an early peaker, is Wijek Singh a slow starter?
Well, if you look at how he was announced as candidate, you know, there's a lot of people saying, especially in the Barisan Nasional camp, they're saying that this seat should be contested by an UMNO candidate. But somehow, because he is a seasoned politician, Dr. Wijek Singh, he seems to get the momentum on his side, as Firdaus said, because there are a lot of, I mean, at all his ceramas, there seems to be a fanfare, and there's a feel-good factor to his campaign. And of course, people seem to relate try to tie him up with Datuk Sri Najib and the trial, as well as the ties between Barisan Nasional and PAS, or rather UMNO and PAS. But maybe for Tanjung Piai, it's not a big concern about all this. They would like to see a familiar face, and Datuk Sri Wijekseng is as familiar as you can get.
So, you know, what's interesting is that I'm looking at all the, again, you know, all these kind of polling centers coming out to give a sentiment of just what's happening with, you know, the sentiment in Tanjung Piai. And they all say that it looks like it's Barisan Nasional's race to lose, right?
Yes. That seems to be the flavor of this week. You know, they are talking about the seat is going to go to BN, and it's going to be won marginally by Wijekseng because of there are various factors. The Pakatan Harapan, the 6 candidates and everything seems to point to Wijekseng as the eventual victor of this contest.
Okay, so before we get to the other aspirants, the independents from Gerakan and from Bajasa, you know, this quick, we talked about Papagomo and how this video of him calling for the stripping, video of him calling for the stripping of voting rights for Chinese and Indian Malaysians. Now, do you think something like that would have any traction in Tanjung Piai? Will it be seen? This is a constituency that's essentially half and half, Malay and Chinese, with 1% Indians.
I mean, logically speaking, if you just look at the video and just look at it's really, it's really demeaning to non-Malays, you know. So talk about stripping voting rights, and I'm sure it will affect, somehow it will affect. But Wijekseng seems to be running a very, I would say, a smooth campaign. He seems to be evading all the tough questions effectively. But I wouldn't put as I'm on Wijekseng's side, but this is the observations I've gathered from the people there. It seems to show that he seems to be taking the punches better than Karmaini. And at the end of the day, this contest will decide, I mean, who gets beaten up less. And in this case, it's probably Wijekseng.
All right, well, let's take a look at Wendy Subramaniam now. She is the Deputy Secretary General for Gerakan. It was a bit of an interesting, I guess, when it was announced, the candidate list, I was interested to see that Gerakan was on the list. So what about Wendy Subramaniam?
Okay, so I managed to get into a phone call with her. She seems to be, I would say, very positive and very excited. And I asked her about, you know, how is it like to position Gerakan? Because Gerakan I would say this is their first foray into the by-election, and maybe we can hear a bit of what she says.
If I win, it shows that the Rakyat do not want, the Rakyat wants a more progressive government. So we do not want a government that talks about race and religion, but come out with a policy that actually benefits the Rakyat.
All right, what do you think about Wendy's responses?
It sounds like a woman of few words.
Yeah.
Yes.
She must have been very busy today.
Yes, she gave very curt responses, and it seems that she knows this is the vision. She's positioning Gerakan to be the third force. How true that will be, we have to wait what's next for Gerakan after the by-election.
Okay, well, what about the Bajasa candidate, Datuk Dr. Badrul Hisham Abdul Aziz? Yeah. This was an interesting, also, I guess, part of the list of the nominations.
Yes, because if you just look at his resume, he probably has one of the best resumes compared, you know, just comparing his resume. So, but my question to him was, how does he handle being, because Bajasa has ties to PAS, and now PAS has ties to UMNO, and they are endorsing the MCA candidate, and having Bajasa there just complicates things. But maybe we can hear what he has to say on the matter.
And comparing to the other parties, I believe that among the 6 candidates, I think the final 3 parties will gather the most votes from the voters. I am very confident that the 3 will be our party, Bajasa, and PH, and also Barisan Nasional.
Okay, so here we have the lineup. We have actually more candidates. Some of the independents have not actually even shown themselves,
yes.
Strangely enough. Do we have a reason why they've thrown their hat in the ring and then decided to be invisible?
That's the weird thing. And usually independent candidates, I've covered by-election, independent candidates will try to be there, but apparently for Dr. Ang, he seems to say that he's in there just to make a statement. He's not going out to campaign. And for the other candidate, she's basically saying that, she's trying her best, just putting herself up to see how far she could go as an independent candidate.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering whether they have a name recognition within Tanjung Piai communities, and who's, again, when we're looking at this, whether there will be any kind of serious contenders or challengers to the 3 or 4 main candidates, right?
Based on the feedback that I gather from our colleague Firdaus, he seems to think that this is definitely between the two big parties.
Well, what is the sentiment that we're getting from Firdaus on the ground?
He is saying that this is a very closely contested by-election compared to other by-elections, which, let's say, for Rantau or Semenyih, somehow you have a feeling that the win will go to one candidate. But in the case of Tanjung Piai, yes, Wee Jack Seng seems to have the upper hand, but you never know. There's one day left. Karmaini just might come up with an uppercut tomorrow and just takes the win.
There's still time.
Very quickly, the question of voters from outside of the state or outside of the thing, the returning voters, now that seemed to be very important. A lot of Johorians work in Singapore, and that was a big issue in the last general election, whether they would get the time off or make the effort. And, a general election perhaps might not seem as consequential as a by-election for those kinds of voters. Do we have any sense of whether people are going to make the effort to return? And whether voter turnout is going to be a major issue in deciding the outcome.
That's even the concern of the election commission, and the sentiment seems to think that it shows that people may not come back during a by-election, especially when you are probably disappointed with the whole system. People who are working in Singapore or even KL might not even come back, because based on what Firdaus spoke with, largely the voters there are actually living in Tanjung Piai and not someone, from the outside.
And I guess we're looking at the different scenarios, right, that could happen. And I'm just wondering, when we were talking earlier about whether this is Barisan Nasional's race to lose, what the consequences are in terms of if it swings to Barisan Nasional, what the consequences are for Pakatan Harapan, or if it swings the other way, what the consequences are for an MCA candidate within this very fragile coalition of Barisan Nasional right now.
Yes, it will make it very interesting because we will have 2 Wees and both of them are from MCAs. But I think if Barisan Nasional were to win this, it shows that there are still some fight and there's still some, I would say, some pulling power with this whole Muafakat Nasional thing. It seems that people are buying it. It will show that. And Pakatan Harapan should be worried because this is their seat. Tanjung Piai was their seat. Even though won marginally, it's still their seat. So it's their seat to lose. If Pakatan wins, it shows that, everything is good with Pakatan. But
that's not necessarily true, right? So one of the options is that people say, well, okay, so we know the devil that we had for 60 years. Now we've voted these guys and they're not performing quite right. There's some things they're doing that's good. But one of the biggest problems for Pakatan is messaging. The messaging hasn't been really positive. We have Dr. Mahathir saying things like, if everybody's unhappy, I'm doing the right thing. Now, I don't know how many people agree with that and want a country built on basically everybody being unhappy. So, and then, of course, there's all this infighting in Pakatan as well. So Pakatan has proven to be a rather fractious and somewhat, a coalition that's fighting against itself in many ways. Do you think that people might want to punish Pakatan, remind them of their promises, remind them of their higher aspirations by actually voting them out?
That's the narrative that actually works for Barisan Nasional, because they keep saying that even though if Pakatan lose, they are not losing the government. So this is the best chance of adding one more, reminding them that, okay, if you don't do it right, we're just going to vote you out.
Wow, Barisan Nasional wants to help Pakatan fulfill its election manifesto. That would be a first.
Yes.
That would be a first.
In this case, it works for them.
Okay, wonderful.
All right, thank you so much, Hafiz, for joining us on the show today. We're going to continue our look, of course, at Tanjung Piai and the campaign that's happening there in the lead up to this Saturday's polls. But that's all the time we have for the show today. I will be back with you with Sharaad Kuttan tomorrow.
Yes, me included.
Same time for another episode of Consider This. Thank you for watching and good night.